Hello, and welcome everybody to episode 72 of Comic DNA, Expedition. Oh, hang on. I forgot to check this one. We messed this up last time. This is Expedition 13. Am I correct, Alex?
Man,
Okay, I'm
I don't even
officially
know.
abandoning the Expedition.
You put it on YouTube, the last one, as
12.
12 and 13.
Oh, man.
We talked about this,
I.
which is fine with me. But whatever you want to call it is
This
good.
is Expedition 14, 15, and 16.
Sounds, that's probably the clearest way to put it.
Whatever. We're talking about issues 14, 15, and 16 of the original X-Men run, written by Stan Lee. I should put quotes around written. Also written with layouts by Stan Lee and Jay Gavin, I believe, is the penciler still.
Layouts by Jack Kirby.
What did I say? Stan Lee there again?
You gave
Man.
Stan Lee double credit.
Boy, he doesn't even have to try
When
to
he probably
get it.
should have had like half credit.
Yeah, yeah. Layouts, writing and
Ew.
layouts by Jack Kirby, of course. Duh. Okay, so the reason we're talking about 3 issues on this episode is because at this point in the series they started doing more serialized stories, and this is kind of a 3-issue arc about the Sentinels, first appearance of the Sentinels.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's a lot to talk about, I think. But before we do, Alex, why don't we just go through the plot synopsis?
All right,
And,
jump right in.
It's almost unfair that you have to do 3 issues.
Well, it's a little unfair, but I'm actually going to do a really short plot synopsis.
I was gonna say
I'm going to try and avoid the nitty-gritty and just
yeah,
go quick here.
yeah.
So you want me to jump right in?
Yes, let's just go for it.
Okay. So this is 3 issues telling the first appearance of the Sentinels. It starts with a splash page of the X-team recovering from the previous issue after overcoming the Juggernaut, but taking a beating in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of training, they're all kind of doing these recovery things. From there, Professor X says they get to take a vacation. They're all excited about that. And then we quickly cut to the first appearance of Dr. Bolivar Trask, who is the creator of the Sentinels. But before we get into that, he's noted as an important anthropologist.
Yeah.
I believe is his claim to fame.
One of our greatest anthropologists.
Yeah. So his humble beginnings as an anthropologist.
Turn to AI cybernetic.
Yeah. We'll get into why maybe that wasn't a great idea. But he's an anthropologist, and he's putting forth this theory that mutants are a legitimate menace to humanity. And I think this is the first time where this really gets pushed hard in the X-Men.
Yes.
Which is interesting to see it kind of finally happening. There's been some little bits and pieces of the Prejudice stuff early on. One of the earlier issues had a bit with the Toad posing as an athlete and people not trusting him. Sorry, I'm hopping back here because they thought he was cheating because he had powers.
Right. It's relevant because I think it really was, other than this issue, that was almost kind of the only moment where they really played up that aspect of the X-Men.
Right.
Like it would occasionally be stated, like they would always have, Professor X would always give his speech about how we must work, for the world that hates and fears us, that he would occasionally give those kind of speeches, but we didn't really see it in action a lot, except for that Toad scene. That was a big one.
Right. That was pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, even the X-Men have seemed to be pretty well received and liked.
Right.
So this is important. This is the first big anti-mutant push in the X-Men comics, where Dr. Trask is saying that mutants have these powers and they will ultimately subjugate humanity, so they need to be stopped. Something has to be done. And he's kind of fear-mongering and kind of You get the kind of 60s vibe of, kind of like a Red Scare kind of thing. Really sort of playing to people's concerns and blowing it out of proportion and being kind of a fanatic. So he basically makes the headlines with this assertion that mutants are a menace and there's, this secret danger amongst us and they have to be found and stopped. But just moving things along here. Basically, the X-Men kids go on vacation. Professor Xavier hears about Trask's theories. He decides to debate him on television. In the process, Trask has... there's not much of a debate.
Yeah.
Trask just pretty quickly says, the mutants are a menace, and I have created the Sentinels to deal with it. So we hop into the action pretty quick.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, he shows the Sentinels as his anti-mutant plan, and they, within a few pages, rebel.
It is startling how fast it happens.
It really is.
It's actually it all happens on the same page. Like when you really look at it, the first page with the Sentinels, like you have on page 7, you have the giant arm that kind of grabs Professor Xavier's shoulder, and it's kind of the suspense panel. And then you turn the page, and you see the Sentinels, and it's the first panel. And Trask is talking about how the Sentinels, how he's created them to protect. And literally 3 panels later, it just blasts Trask, and it just completely rebels. Like, breaks its program.
Full robot uprising.
Yeah.
Like
that did not take long.
No.
I'm sorry. Alex, will you allow me a Simpsons reference here?
Sure. Go for it.
When the Itchy and Scratchy Land episode, when Professor Frink is running the calculations, and he's like, according to chaos theory, all robots will rebel against their masters in an orgy of violence. How much time do we have, Doctor? Roughly 24 hours. And then the robot immediately starts killing people. And goes, I forgot to carry the 1.
That's pretty much what happens here.
That's like exactly what happens. Yeah.
It's like, here's the robot solution, and the robot solution immediately turns on everyone. So, moving along. The justification from the Sentinels is that in order to protect humanity, they have to control humanity. Or something to that effect. So they kind of turn on everyone in order to make the world safer for people. They decide they have to be in control. And then from there, it's pretty much the X-Men get called in. They fight briefly, and then pretty much for the remainder of the issue and the next 2 issues, it's an X-Men versus Sentinels throwdown. Trask is taken back to the Sentinels' lair where he created them. We're introduced to Master Mold, who I always wondered about that name, but it makes sense to me now. It's a mold like a mold for, in a factory, a machine part.
Yes.
He's the original template for the Sentinels. I never got that before. Silly me. So we're introduced to Master Mold, and he's the head of the Sentinels. He's kind of the hive mind, and he basically tells Trask, "You're going to help me make even more Sentinels, or I'm going to do bad things to humanity, and I'm going to use these additional Sentinels to control the world, basically, to stop mutants and keep humans safe, even though he's kind of, clearly taking away their freedom."
Yeah.
The X-Men, minus Professor X, managed to infiltrate the base. At one point, Beast is captured, which we can talk about more, because I thought it was kind of interesting and kind of funny.
Yeah.
And they kind of tell the origin of Beast, which is in issue 15. But ultimately, without going into too many little details, Professor X, who does not enter the base, figures out how to defeat the Sentinels. The X-Men are doing a lot of fighting. It's 3 issues of fighting, basically.
Yeah.
They get captured. There's ups and downs. But ultimately, Professor Xavier, using a crystal, which he figures out can disrupt their frequencies and their communications, short circuits the bulk of the Sentinels. The X-Men escape. And then ultimately, Trask, who's filled with remorse, I guess, he sees the error of his ways.
Yeah.
Destroys some of the machinery that Master Mold was using, and in the process, stops Master Mold but is killed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much how it ends. Am I forgetting anything major there?
No, I think you pretty much covered the big beats. Yeah. Trask sacrifices himself because it's kind of abrupt. The X-Men kind of have to like shuffle their way out, like because the whole area is kind of exploding and falling apart. The secret Sentinel lair.
Right.
Um,
There's a fair amount of back and forth as Trask is taken back to the Sentinel plant, and they're basically wildly out of control.
mm-hmm.
He's sort of seeing the error of his ways. He's sort of seeing like, oh, the X-Men were actually on my team, and oh, I never should have done this, and oh, I should have never given these Sentinels all these powerful weapons, and he's clearly conflicted and regretting his life decisions, and ultimately he sacrifices himself.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks to Xavier stopping all the other Sentinels, the X-Men are capable of escaping as the fortress kind of explodes around them.
Right. And then the final panel is that little tease for the next story arc. The shadow on the wall. Shadowy
had to
menace.
get that in there.
Yeah.
Some new, even more sinister villain.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's pretty much it. It's I mean, it's 3 issues, but it's like a pretty action-packed for all 3 of them.
Yeah, and we could talk about a lot of the little action bits, but it basically boils down to X-Men fighting, X-Men getting captured, X-Men saving each other, X-Men fighting.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I mean, it's action heavy, definitely.
Yeah. I think.
There's some.
Well, like, okay, so like before we start talking about any specifics, why don't you tell me like what's your initial like first impressions, gut reaction to these 3 issues?
I liked it pretty well. It was a little long for the story that was told. It was mostly action. I think it probably could have been done.
I think 2 issues for sure. For sure, yeah. Yeah.
But overall, like as mentioned, this is the first time that we're really getting the anti-mutant hysteria. It's a good introduction to the Sentinels. It kind of has that sci-fi Twilight Zone kind of undercurrent to it of this
the folly of man,
this fanatic thinks he's got a solution, and then it bites him in the butt in a way he wasn't expecting, and there's kind of a lesson. So overall, I mean, I think it's pretty good. A little long, pretty wordy.
Yeah.
But I think I would put it in the above average or.
yeah. I would definitely.
I would put it on the good side of X-Men stories.
I would definitely put these in the upper echelon. I think one of the things I always kind of go back to when I make a joke about the first dozen issues about how there's like 4 good issues. And, of course, now we're not in the first dozen anymore. We're in issue 14. But I'm specifically talking about the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby comics. And, yes, even though Kirby didn't really pencil this, I'm still counting this as a Jack Kirby comic because the reason he did the layouts was so that he would keep writing it for Stan. I'm just I'm just taking that as is, unless I haven't seen enough.
He was still driving the storytelling.
Yeah, exactly. So I would put these like in that sort of nebulous the good issues section. Even though there's some kitschiness to it and there's kind of a Deus Ex Machina ending to it, and I agree that it's pretty wordy and really stretched out too far. But I mean, as you noted, it actually like seriously addresses some of the main themes of the X-Men, which is something that is, I mean, not many of the issues have actually done. And so this issue doesn't, or these issues, I should say, do it pretty smartly. You know, like it's pretty. I don't want to necessarily say highbrow, but I mean, there's actually some serious major deep themes going on in this comic.
Yeah, and there's space dedicated to it.
Yeah.
There's a bit where the debate starts between Trask and Professor Xavier, and it cuts to a couple panels of the public. Like what they're thinking as these ideas are being thrown out. It's a lot more filled in thematically than in previous issues.
Yes, definitely. And that's something that like we've complained about so much about these old issues, the previous issues, even the ones that we said were pretty good, like the Savage Land issue, which was like the reason we gave that a 3 out of 5 was because it was a competent, entertaining story, but it really wasn't that deep. Like it really wasn't about much of anything. But these issues are about something. You know, and so. That's a really good point. That's why these really stand out to me. You know, they're doing something different with the themes that they set up, or not something different, but they're actually doing something with the themes they set up, I should say, instead of it just being, you know, just kind of a X-Men go on an adventure story.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's actually about the X-Men.
It's clearly an X-Men story. Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think that it for the comics at the time, what I know of them and what I've seen of the other X-Men issues, it does it pretty well.
It does, yeah. I actually really like the character of Bolivar Trask, especially the way he's written here. I mean, it's your standard like he's not. I think I mentioned how much I like Juggernaut as a villain because he's just a jerk and he's just like a bad guy. And Trask is a great villain because he's that tragic hubris. You know, he's a guy who thinks there's a problem and he's here to solve it, and it gets away from him, and you know he has an arc, I guess, which is another.
He does,
thing,
he does have an arc. I mean, it's not. That's a good way to put it. He sees a problem. He's not really shown as being an outright hate monger or racist.
Right. It's not even the same as later issues where like Chris Claremont does parallels to like TV evangelists, and it's like these people think they have the answers, but they're evil. You know, they're hateful, and that's why they hate mutants. Like Trask is really like he's kind of a hard ass. You know, like he's you know, Kirby draws him with the big eyebrows and or,
sure.
You know, like he just looks like kind of a jerky old guy, but you know, he's not really shown to be like bad. You know what I mean? Like other than the fact that he misunderstands mutants or he has the wrong impression or opinion on mutants.
Right. Like his ideas are shown to be dangerous and he's misguided, but it's not like it shows him, you know, pushing a mutant kid or something.
Well, and that's actually something that is something that bothers me in a lot of fiction. And this is the kind of thing I'll use this kind of as an example of why I like Trask and why there's a lot of room, just the way he's shown in this story. The difference. I'm going to talk about like styles of writing, and when you see a story that feels really like more like propaganda and less fiction, it's because it would have been really easy if you wanted the audience to understand that Trask doesn't just have like he's not just the antagonist and he doesn't just have bad ideas. He's also a bad person. So you would write a scene where you show him being really heartless to somebody else, even maybe to another human, and it's just like to show him as a jerk. And that's why ultimately he's wrong. It's not that the ideas he was debating here are bad. It's that he's also a bad person. I don't know if I'm doing a great job of explaining this, but I see this in stories all the time where they take that extra step to kind of show.
Well,
I have a perfect example.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to just jump into you. And I don't necessarily want to go off about the Marvel movies, but
Okay.
this is exactly the example that I'm thinking of, and this bothered me so much in the Marvel movies. In Captain America: Winter Soldier, which I thought was one of the stronger Marvel movies, like it actually had like a real decent themes and something relevant to say about Captain America, and also relevant to say it about modern society. And I think it just all threw it away in the ending with the reveal that what's his name, the bad guy, the Shield,
Robert Redford's character.
Robert Redford's character was so awful. I hated him so much because it started off like it's good. It's like, okay, here's a guy who's he's going too far in the whole, like he's willing to sacrifice everybody else's freedom for their protection, and he has a righteous cause, right? That's Trask. That's the same thing. Like he has a righteous cause and he thinks he's doing the right thing. But then in the movie, just to make sure that you understand that it's not just that he's taking these ideas too far, because good people can sometimes take bad ideas too far. He's also shown it's not just that. He's not just a Shield agent going too far. He's actually Hydra.
He's just straight up Hydra
He's just
supervillain.
straight up Hydra supervillain, and he straight up murders his maid. Like he's not just a guy who's like, I'm willing to do this because I think it's best for everybody, and maybe he's willfully ignorant of the true damage it would cause. No, once his plans are almost found out, he murders his maid because he's a bad guy, and then you don't really have to think about the ramifications of the ideas he was talking about, because he's a bad guy and he's a part of Hydra. That bothered me so much, and that just like completely, I don't want to say it ruined the movie because I don't want to sound like I'm too critical, but I am the type of person where that ruins the movie for me, because it's like he's no longer a challenging, complex character. It's just he's a bad guy. He's willing to murder people.
Especially if this story has a moral bent to it.
Yes.
If the villain, or the character in the role of the villain, is conflicted and has bad ideas, but he's trying to do it for what he thinks are the right reasons, there might be, you see some glimmer of humanity in that person, and you risk recognizing that, oh my gosh, maybe I too have bad ideas. Like maybe this is a human thing.
That's
maybe
exactly right.
Maybe we have to be careful about this. But when you throw that away and you say, well, he had these bad ideas because he was a cackling maniac, you stop looking at the character as, I need to be careful. Maybe there's something to be learned here, and you just think, well, he thought that because he was
bad,
evil, and I'm not evil, so there's nothing to learn here.
So I don't have to worry about anything that I'm thinking because I know that I'm not evil. I don't murder people.
Right.
I know, and that's so I don't want to go off on like a whole rant about like why I dislike a lot of modern stories, but I think a lot of modern stories, particularly with movies, and even a lot of modern comics, actually, they go in that direction. I think that a lot of writers can't help themselves but to try and really project who you're supposed to think is the bad guy. And I think that and just to bring it back to these Jack Kirby Stan Lee issues, I think that it's in its simplicity, it actually presents a more understandably relatable and simultaneously complex set of characters by not making the character overtly evil. It's not the same as like you, even in previous issues where you had Magneto, who's the head of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and he's just a big jerk who's willing to kill anybody, and he's a bad guy. But they didn't go that direction with Trask, and they didn't do any of those scenes where like
he's just sacrificing his minions.
Yeah, exactly. Like he really thought what he was doing was going to be for the good of humanity. And okay, rant over.
No, it's I think it's a good point. It's sometimes a tricky point to it's a nuanced point. It's sometimes tricky to lay out exactly in an easy soundbite.
Yes.
But
yeah.
I do think it's really interesting that though Trask is clearly wrong,
Mm-hmm.
it never goes that, especially after like what 4 issues with Magneto and
Yeah.
the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants doing stupid cartoon villain things.
Right.
Trask never does those things. He's misguided and ultimately pays for it with his life.
Yeah. It's so much stronger. Like it's such better storytelling.
Yeah.
Because it's a true reflection of humanity.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
Trask comes back to life later.
yeah, yes, he does. I believe. I know at some point it's his son, but I'm sure Bolivar Trask does come back. I can't, or at least
Okay.
I shouldn't say
sure.
I shouldn't say I'm sure because I really that it's a little hazy that in between. Like there's I've read almost all of the Claremont issues, but it was some time ago, and I've read a lot of these early Jack Kirby and Stan Lee issues. I haven't read a lot of that that little in between period, which is just nobody's read them. They're not great. The Roy Thomas issues.
Okay.
But we can talk about that at another time. But anyway, the point is, I can't be expected to follow 40, 50 years of X-Men comics. I can't remember all of that.
No, it's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
But I just there's so much X-Men mythos. I was like, this is a really nice. It's a story where the character has an arc and an ending, and it works really well. And then I just chuckle because it's like, but it's comics, and this was in the '60s, and certainly he was resurrected.
Certainly.
Or maybe he wasn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Whatever.
Guess I'm just a casual X-Men fan. I don't have all this stuff down.
Yeah, you're not.
Just casual.
You're not true. Yeah, just plebeian.
Filthy casual.
Filthy casual.
All right, so where were we?
Yeah, so talking about this X-Men comic. But yeah, so I guess really, I like these issues a lot, as I said, for a lot of the reasons I just said. There's like there's just a real story to it, but it's also, I like I will agree that it's too long. I think that by the 3rd issue, I was really kind of feeling I was ready for it to just get over with because there's a lot of like back and forth. Like the X-Men fight, then they get captured, then they sort of get freed, and then they fight some more, and it does feel like action filler. Some of it is suspenseful, like genuinely suspenseful.
Yeah, there's some good bits.
I really like. Oh, go ahead.
But damn it, there are a lot of action scenes where not that much is happening, but you're getting like 4 to 6 speech bubbles per square, and it's just like, just let it move forward.
I was gonna say that.
Stop it.
It's really interesting that some of the issues we read before that we complained about, like, were pretty breezy reads. Even with Stan Lee's overwriting, everything's overwritten. But these 3 issues were pretty dense. Like Stan was really pouring it on.
Yeah. I definitely felt that.
Yeah.
Like there were bits. So I read these 3 issues in one sitting.
Yeah.
And granted, I wanted to like push through them, but there were bits where there was so much text, I wasn't really looking at the art anymore because I was just like, I get it. Let's move forward here. Like,
yeah.
Which is it kind of bums me out when that happens in a comic where I'm not taking the time to enjoy the pictures.
Right. I know what you mean though. I definitely had that feeling in these issues.
Yeah.
So, well, one other thing I wanted to talk about, specifically in issue 14, was this kind of ties in with the like the weird introduction to Trask about how he's an anthropologist.
Uh-huh.
So he's been studying. I guess he's sort of studying mutants. It's not
Yeah,
really clear.
it doesn't really
So there's
clarify what has led him in his knowledge of anthropology to decide.
there's a lot of things that are kind of unclear in this story. Actually, this is one of them. There's another point that I'll bring up that's kind of unclear. But yeah, the whole like he's an anthropologist, so he decided to make robots is kind of strange. But going with
It's
the
very complicated.
go, yeah, but going with the kind of the real motivations of Trask, if he is an anthropologist, it would actually make sense for him to be really pretty aggressively against mutants. Like if it's not brought up in this issue, but I can't help but go reference our like possibly both of our favorite X-Men comics, the Grant Morrison series in New X-Men, and how it opened with that was it Cassandra Nova was showing the Neanderthals being wiped out by Homo sapiens. And she was saying, it was the big setup of like, this is what happened when two species coexisted. One of them wiped the other out, and now it's going to happen again. And that's mutants are going to wipe out humans, whatever. So it would not be hard to understand that Bolivar Trask, as an anthropologist, would come to the same conclusion, and therefore, it's a war, and humans have to be prepared. Like we don't have powers, so we need to come up with some kind of defenses.
Yeah, sure.
I
mean, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it just ties into his like realistic motivations for the character, even though it's not actually explicitly stated. But
I think it fits really well with the time period too when it was written of, fighting. I mean, he even mentions like the atomic bomb and communism all these kind of threats that people were reacting to in the 60s, coming out of the World War II, 50s, 60s, of these threats to our way of life, these things that were substantially different than what we had fought to establish. So it's some nice parallels there. I don't know much else to say.
I mostly wanted to bring that up as a segue to talk about Grant Morrison's new X-Men. Did you recognize the panel on page 6 of issue 14?
Issue 14. I didn't. I'm having to look back.
Okay, this is the panel, panel 2 in the newspaper. The artist's interpretation of the fate of mankind if mutants are not driven out as predicted by Dr. Bolivar Trask. So that drawing of the mutant with the whip and the humans are slaves. That panel, that image was reused in Grant Morrison's series. That was the
Quentin
Quire. Yeah, Quentin Quire.
There we go.
They used that specific image, Quentin Quire, and he specifically referenced it as like an old newspaper clipping. Like an old newspaper clipping of what they thought mutants were going to do to humans, and it was, I don't know, it's just, we all know Grant Morrison loves, we know Grant Morrison loves his deep continuity dives, but this is it.
It's cool. Yeah. Eventually we'll do the Morrison's X-Men.
Eventually.
Discussion, but
not today.
But it's cool to see the pieces.
So yeah, so I mostly was I'm just bringing this up to say I'm disappointed that you didn't immediately catch that.
I missed it. Yeah. Oh, good point. Interesting.
Yeah, but anyway,
isn't it another Morrison digression?
Yes.
The start with Cassandra Nova where they're talking about the early species killing each other. It's Trask's like distant relative, right? He's a dentist.
Yeah,
it's another Trask
that's
that
correct.
he needs to get master mold. That she needs to get master mold working.
That's what it is. So more continuity.
So we're just going to talk about Grant Morrison.
I mean, we might as well. Just like I haven't read the issues in a while, but I could talk for a long time about Grant Morrison's X-Men. But we're not going to.
This is good to do this before we eventually have that talk, because
yes,
we'll be less ignorant as a result.
That's kind of my idea. We got to get some of this early stuff out of the way, so
Educate
we actually
ourselves
know
on
what we're talking
fundamentals.
about.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but yeah, so
Fair enough.
it's just a fun little continuity moment there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's that. That's one thing I wanted to bring up. Another thing I wanted to bring up was the whole like plot of Master Mold himself.
Mm-hmm.
When I was reading these issues, well, I found the whole Master Mold and the Sentinels thing kind of confusing. It's at some point,
Okay.
like the Sentinels, there's a little like because of the nature of the story, like being suspenseful, and like trying to stretch the drama out. So like Master Mold's not in issue 14. He's the big reveal for 15 when the Sentinels
Yes.
take the X-Men back, and
Uh-huh.
but there's like a few things about all like the Sentinel stuff that I liked, but I couldn't tell if it was done on purpose or not. Like
Okay.
there was a point where they referred to the X-Men as humans, I think,
Mm-hmm.
or they referred to the mutants as humans, which
Mm-hmm.
which I like that aspect of the Sentinels of them sort of not. I mean, I think it was a mistake, but I liked this idea of like the Sentinels really didn't discern much of a difference between humans and mutants because to them
Mm-hmm.
they're all bioorganisms the same, and they're just going to protect them by enslaving them. I don't think that's
It
really
is confusing.
I don't think that's really a part of it, but yeah, I don't know. There was a little bit of like weird stuff back and forth like that in these issues.
There's a bit where they break in, and the Sentinels are depicted as being kind of dumb robots without their leader.
Yeah. Which I loved. I loved that scene when the Sentinel was like, I don't have my orders. Follow me to the leader, and he'll give me orders on what to do with you. So they're just like, well, we can't fight him because we can't defeat him, so let's just go along with it and see what happens.
It was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But he does start it with saying, humans.
Yeah,
I
that's
was not
it. Yeah.
programmed to expect additional ones.
Yes.
But, like, Angel's right there flying around.
Right.
So you can't say, like,
they're programmed
he
to sense
wasn't
mutants.
sure.
Yeah.
Like, presumably you know what a human is if this is your whole reason for existing.
That's your whole programming, yeah.
Like, my initial thought was, oh, well, they don't... This is a 60s comic. They're not, like, using some sort of sensors or crazy science. They're just, like, if they use their powers, the robots know.
Yeah.
Except they're, like, using their powers right in front of him.
Right in front of him,
So
yeah.
it's like...
Yeah. It's... that's a weird scene. That actually was the scene I was thinking of. Like, I thought it was going to kind of lead somewhere else, but it was just kind of silly.
Yeah, it was almost like a gag.
Yeah.
More than anything, I kind of wonder.
There actually were a couple of gags kind of throughout this.
Mm-hmm.
There was, while we're on the subject of gags, there was a gag that I actually thought was incredible, like laugh out loud incredible. That this is like one of the only times I can really give credit to Stan Lee for writing like a really great gag and just completely inserting it into the art.
What one was it? Because there was one laugh out loud moment I had in these three comics.
Well, I should say this was a laugh out loud moment that wasn't like kitschy laugh out loud. Like it's a genuine joke, and I loved it. When it's in issue 16, when the X-Men are in that like gravity bubble, and they're about to put Beast into it, and so the X-Men are formulating a plan to get out, and it's page 9 of issue 16, and it's the final panel where they're getting ready to break out, and there's this huge text box completely breaking the fourth wall, and it's all narration, and it just says personal note For those of you who might want to make your own heavy gravity globe, we'll just tip you off that the opening is formed by repelling the atomic particles within the globule's structure. There, now the rest will be easy. That is a great joke. I love that.
Okay.
It's
Gotcha.
exactly the kind of thing. Not to just like do a little self promotion here, but it's actually exactly the type of writing that I'm trying to do in my book, Amoral Stingray, with a really like irreverent narrator that's just kind of making non sequitur jokes or kind of jokes about the story. And I thought that was just so funny. Like it clearly like wasn't supposed to be there. Like that's just supposed to be the big preparation scene where they're about to break out, and it's sort of like the suspense of like, I got to turn the page. Are they going to break out or not? But Stan Lee decided to put a joke there, and
it's.
I actually think
it's a good point. It's just a totally unnecessary little thing he threw in for some.
And it's like the only moment in these issues where that happens. Like all the other times, the narration is more of like, lead the story along. Here's what's happening with this, or here are the old explaining what's happening in the panels. But this was a complete fourth wall breaking joke where he's talking to the readers, and that sarcastic, if you want to, if you want to make your own science stuff.
Pro tip.
Like pro tip. Yeah, exactly. Like that's great. I really loved it. So that was my laugh out loud moment. That wasn't like a kitschy laugh out loud moment. I think that's a genuine joke, and I think it's genuinely hilarious.
Okay.
So what was your laugh out loud moment?
I don't know how much of a joke this is or not, but I feel like it had to be kind of intentional because it's just silly. So in issue 15 on page 16, when they're questioning the beast, and it's like hopping back and forth. And top of the page, the first line for Master Mold is, and I just imagine this in like the booming robot villain voice. And then you won a scholarship to college. Now, continue your biography.
Yes. That was great. No, that is good. That's hilarious. That's kitschy though. Like I think that's kitschy. That's like because that's like after the commercial break, you have to have that line of dialogue where you just remind everybody what's happening.
Right. It's just so silly. It's hopping back and forth. The previous page, the
X-Men fighting.
X-Men are fighting and sneaking around, and then we hop back to what was going on with the Beast again, and that's a reminder. And you won a scholarship. Continue your speech.
Yeah. That's a pretty good one.
Silly.
Yeah. It is funny.
So there's a fair amount of with the Beast stuff and with other bits. There's a fair amount of backstory that kind of humanizes a lot of the things happening. Relative to the issues.
I was gonna say like about the Beast origin, like one thing that I like about these old comics and that I hate about new comics is that I hate origin stories. I hate them. I really do, because all superhero origins are the same, and everybody wants to do like some big long dramatic epic, and it's just the same thing. Like I'm not going to go on a rant about how many times we have to read Superman's origin, but it's too many. And but I like the way I really like the way these old series are done, especially sort of the X-Men. And then this was sort of the joke, was like the joke when they came up with the X-Men was they really didn't have any idea for like origins of like because they did Fantastic Four, and the first issue is an origin. It's Reed Richards steals a spaceship and goes into space, and they get blasted with cosmic rays, and then they get powers. And the old joke is that they couldn't, like Stan and Jack couldn't come up with an idea of like why they have powers. So then somebody had the idea, I'm sure Stan would say that it was him, that they just have powers. We'll just call them mutants, and they'll just have powers, and we'll call the book The Mutants. And that was it. And so that's the origin. So the issue starts with like no origin for the characters. They're mutants, so they're at a school for mutants. That's it. And then I like the way character origins are weaved in later stories. I prefer character origins where you learn them where other characters learn them, as like a backstory that's relevant to another story happening, in the comic that I'm reading.
I agree.
I
It's
don't like
nice.
big long like every new series has to start with a 6-page or a 6-page. I wish 6-page, a 6-issue epic about how this character got their powers and what motivates them, and it's just terrible. Like
uh,
I just
I agree. It's nice how this is kind of it's not that much backstory, and it's kind of woven into something else.
yes, and that's why I like it, and I do agree because it does a good job of humanizing Beast, as it were. I like that his parents are really supportive of him. Like because it's so easy and often done. Well, like everybody gets the Iceman origin where
Right.
where the
I mean, as of late, like the past 15 years, that's just like the default, like
yeah, the parents
the
hate him.
default X-Men story.
Yeah.
Like
No,
everything's bad.
no son of mine is a goddamn mutie,
Right.
and it's like
Right.
it just pouring it on so thick. And I really like that Beast's parents really love him, and they're really suspicious of Professor Xavier. Like they're like, some people think he's strange and call him a freak, but he's our son, damn it. He's a good boy. And like the dad kind of like is like challenging Professor X. He kind of like gets a little blustery with him, and Professor X has to be like, no, I'm with you. I think he's great, and I like that. I appreciate that, and I think it's really good. It works really well for the character of Beast because I think Beast is a great character, and I think that it's important to show not every character has to have a broken relationship with their parents. Like
It's nice to have some variety.
it's not just nice to have some variety. I think it's also nice to show that Beast powers. Beast is really smart, and he comes. I don't want to go on like a big socio-political rant, but it's like it's nice to show that a character is successful and he comes from a good home. Like it's not everybody has to overcome insurmountable odds to get where they are. Like some people are a product of their
Some
environment.
people could just be good regular folks.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah.
And I can't speak for any of Beast's origins that may have been retconned in the future, but in this issue I really like it, especially in context of the way they've been showing mutants thus far, and especially in the context of this issue or this story where it's really playing up the whole humans hate and fear mutants, and his parents don't, and they're really protective of him.
No, it's
good.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
It's
I
good.
mean,
I don't need to say much more than that. It's good.
Yeah. To effectively tell good X-Men stories, you need to show a broad range of people, right?
Yes, exactly.
People, backgrounds, realities, demographics. They all got to be there. So just seeing, Beast, who's this smart, likable guy from a family that's looking out for him, it's nice to have that character there.
Right, exactly. So, I don't know. I liked it. I appreciated it.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I thought it was cool, kind of building on that we got to see on their very brief vacation in issue 14 some of the other characters' families and what they were up to in their lives.
I actually wanted to bring that up specifically to talk about that because I did like those scenes. Like I think we've talked about that. That's been like our recurring motif in these episodes is that the character moments are always really good. Like we really mostly really
when they actually do them.
Yeah. When they actually do them, they're good. And I did like all the segments about like Angel with his family. Like getting to see all the characters with their families, and especially you know me, I liked seeing Cyclops as like
being sad,
total loner.
sad, trying to make sense of the world.
Yeah.
All that responsibility.
Just walking away on his own, and poor Professor X carries his loneliness silently.
He knows. What can he do?
It's good character drama. I like it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And
I also really like.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Not to move away from Cyclops because I know you love him.
Yeah, of course.
But I appreciated that we got to see Bernard the poet and the waitress Zelda.
I was gonna, the coffee shop.
I was like, the little character bits they're great and they're strong in this story arc.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happy when we get to see more of those.
There's a lot going for these issues. Like even like with it feeling kind of stretched out. Like the good stuff is really good. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's because it's stretched out we're able to have these kind of little moments. Like I have to imagine like each story has to have a certain amount of action. Like you need these are adolescent boy comics ostensibly. And so it's mostly action, but with it being 3 issues, there is a lot of room for the story to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reason it feels so stretched out probably is because it's a little repetitive and overwritten by the 3rd issue. Mm-hmm. I mean, we get to the I
think it's just the fight scenes.
Yeah.
Which are fine, but they could have just tightened that up a bit. I think everything else is pretty good.
I think so, yeah. Because like the character stuff is good, which I guess to be fair, that most of that happens in issue 14, which I actually liked issue 14 a lot, and I thought issue 15 was pretty good too, kept it going. Issue 16, that's where it started to feel really repetitive. They had kind of a Deus Ex Machina ending for it. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. So I was gonna say let's talk about the ending of how Professor X figures out how to stop the Sentinels.
Sure.
So first of all, what do you think about Professor X being able to use his mental powers to probe the circuits of the robots?
So Professor X's powers are the most ill-defined thing in the X-Men in these issues.
Seriously, yeah.
Since issue 1, is he telekinetic? Is he telepathic? Is he both?
Right.
He can astral project himself. Sometimes electricity affects him when he does that. So,
yeah.
It really is super loose.
It's loose, yes.
Yeah, so reading the robot minds I thought it was kind of dumb, but I thought it was kind of in keeping with the looseness of his powers so far.
The funny thing is, so here's something I'll bring up. I would say that reading the robot minds in the context of the way they understood the technology in the 60s is pretty silly and just kind of careless. But I think this is one of those things where in the future, over time, it's actually going to seem less silly because I think AI might have to incorporate, at a certain point, AI is going to be so complex it might be sort of organic, right? And so then if there's an organic element to it, then Professor X's powers might conceivably work that way. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's too dumb for its own good, but it's eventually gonna spin all the way back around and make sense with future technology. I don't know. I'm really just spitballing here.
I mean,
I guess what I mean to say.
We want to deep dive.
We don't have to deep dive on telepathic AI theories, but
maybe he's picking up on electromagnetic pulses and.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I guess it's kind of strange because maybe it is sort of written into the dialogue, but it seems like the kind of thing you would be able to sort of science away, like my power. I mean, because he does say it's hard for Professor X to do it, and he picks up faint impulses. I think he even says so. It's not like he does talk. It's not like reading a human mind, but. So I think you could just sort of magic wand science it away of, electron.
I mean,
a robot's electronic brain is not that different from a human's organic brain. It's all and everything's matter. It's all electricity. We're all just a bundle of cells.
Sure.
So
Yeah, I totally. And I guess I didn't think about it that hard because, I mean, you also have questions like, how did this anthropologist get this massive fortress to create like robots more advanced than any human technology?
right. Well,
like,
yeah.
none of that's really explained.
None of that's really explained. He's got the underground fortress, but that's another aspect.
All Lucifer could do was make a bomb.
Right. In a cave.
And this guy's got like a sentient machine race that he invented that can apparently create more of themselves indefinitely.
Unlike Trask, Lucifer is a costumed weirdo. Trask is a well-respected member of society. He's probably got financial backing.
Lucifer's just...
He's just some crazy guy with a bomb.
Crazy guy with a bomb under a mountain.
This is a total Venture Brothers territory. Like Lucifer is the guy that the OSI is there to deal with. And Trask plays by the rules.
What are you telling me? Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
It's true. It writes itself. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a Simpsons reference and a Venture Brothers reference. Keep it going. See what else I can get in here. But on the subject of like, another thing that I thought was kind of interesting. I talked about it's sort of confusing how the Sentinels operate and what is exactly the purpose of the Master Mold. So because there's this whole thing where like, okay, so Trask builds Master Mold as like the mold for all the Sentinels. Like basically he builds Master Mold to make more Sentinels so that he has a robot that will make other robots. Mm-hmm. But then Master Mold needs Trask to like operate things. Because Master Mold doesn't know how to make Sentinels, even though that's ostensibly his whole purpose.
Safeguards, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know. It's a little confusing, but I actually think it's going with like the way a lot of science AI theory is today. It actually sort of almost plays into real theory, which is that Trask creates an AI, and then that AI will create more programs, more complex programs than even Trask could make. So it makes sense that Trask couldn't make a Sentinel, but he could make something that could make a Sentinel, if you get my meaning.
Yeah, I think so.
But that's not.
But then why does the thing need Trask permission?
But then that's not really what's going on here. Like it would make so much more sense if he just made Master Mold and it was like an AI program, and then it kept doubling every 30 seconds and getting smarter and smarter until it could create Sentinels. And that's not what happened. There's that confusing aspect where Master Mold has the means to make Sentinels, but he doesn't have the knowledge to make the Sentinels. It's a little wonky.
Agreed.
And I think that kind of goes back to the whole, like, it starts to get all the action starts to get tiresome, because like now we're getting away from character stuff and we're getting into like just kind of weird plot contrivances, and
that's a good way to put it.
And it's just sort of like it feels stretched out.
Just vaguely sciencey sounding stuff to add stuff happening.
Right.
But it's pretty clear that it's not really thought out with any depth.
Right.
So you kind of want it to wrap up versus feeling like invested in what's actually occurring on the page.
Yeah, exactly. But still sort of on the subject of Professor X, I really did like the sequence where he astral projected himself into the underground base and kind of attacked Master Mold. And
it was kind of cool.
It was a good sequence. I liked the suspense of Professor X having to get back to his body. Like if he dissipated, his body would be, consciousless, and just I liked that. That was good, and that was a nice little like cliffhanger for the next issue.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I wasn't really expecting it because I didn't know the rules of Professor X's astral projection.
Right.
But again, the way he was drawn, like kind of desperately
Crawling,
clawing his way back to his comatose body.
Yeah.
It was it added a little tension there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a good cliffhanger.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
Mm-hmm.
Much more interesting than the comatose Sentinel that just like collapses for no reason in issue 14, and then they spend 2 issues sort of trying to figure out why,
Mm-hmm.
and then they find out it's because there's just a big crystal outside the window.
There you go. I don't know why. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just kind of
So here's
Deus Ex.
so
Just
here's
kind of roll with it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit of it's not a little. It is exactly a Deus Ex. But here's the catch. I'm not willing to write it off completely. As somebody who has a wireless headset that has been has had repeated problems with these stupid signals getting interrupted. Okay, it's perfectly believable to me that the signal, if assuming that the Sentinel, in order to operate itself, had to have a constant signal back from the master mold,
Mm-hmm.
that signal would be getting interrupted all the time, like every 30 seconds, in fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
So
That's fair.
I don't know if it would be by a giant crystal. I think that's what makes it sort of just like an ex machina.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't. It's a crystal. You don't have to explain it. They're crystals. It's the 60s.
Crystals do magic stuff, man.
Exactly.
Just let it be.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the crystal interrupts the beam, the transmission.
The crystal.
I mean, I actually. So what I'm getting at is I'm with the idea that okay, so its transmission is interrupted by something. I guess it doesn't make sense to. How do these stupid robots operate? You know, like they're not completely autonomous, I guess, and independent.
Mm-hmm.
But it being a crystal, I guess we get that awesome panel of the 3 helicopters with the giant
flying
crystal.
the crystal in.
Yeah, and it just hovered around this facility over here. That'll do the trick.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's glossed over pretty quickly.
Right.
Like what did they do with the? Because there's
fast and loose.
It's pretty fast and loose. Because they what did they do with the old Sentinel? Because that was the whole thing, was when they find out it's the crystal, and then they're like, well, don't be careful. We can't move the Sentinel because it might get back in range of the transmission, and the crystal won't be blocking it anymore, and then it'll come to life.
Right.
But
I'm trying to think, like, why did the other Sentinels still work, but just the one failed?
Right, exactly, yeah. Because
when they were in the vicinity of the crystal, and then they fly the crystal over, and everything fails. It just you just can't think about it too hard.
The implication is that the Sentinel was standing in the exact spot where the crystal blocked the transmission. So, like, if they moved the Sentinel, it would go back into range of the transmission.
So how did they know where to put the crystal when they flew with the helicopter?
Right, exactly. This gets back to the whole don't think about it too much.
Don't think about it too much.
They just sort of hover the crystal above it, and
Mm-hmm.
and then they all get knocked out. And then thankfully, I guess they did it long enough to disrupt the Sentinel's transmissions, so that without their knowledge, Bolivar Trask could have a crisis of conscience and completely set the self-destruct of the facility.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's just pure luck that Professor X's plan. Although I guess to be fair, Professor X is a telepath. Maybe he knew what Trask was doing. I mean, according to the characterization of Professor X from the previous issues, maybe he even made Professor X, Dr. Trask do it. He just brainwashed him and just is like, you know what, you're going to sacrifice.
So
yourself.
there was no character arc there. It was just
Right.
Professor X shaping the world as he would like it to be.
If I was writing my modern X-Men story, that would be the retcon that I do. I would go back to this seemingly innocent story and do this dark, gritty story about how Professor X actually brainwashed Trask into killing himself to wipe out the Sentinel menace. And it would be this secret that Professor X has held for so long, and he didn't think anybody was going to find out. But then, he left his diary out, and Cyclops found it and lost all faith in Professor X.
Became another Magneto.
Yeah, yeah.
Died because he became the Phoenix or something.
It's gold. It's solid gold, I tell you.
Sounds like gold.
It's what the fans want.
So they keep telling me.
Yeah. Okay, that's going to be it for our references to modern X-Men comics. Jokes. So,
waka waka waka.
Yeah, I don't know if I have much else to say about these issues. Well, I'm trying to think if there was like a key point or a moment that I might have glossed over that I wanted to make mention of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there is. I think we covered it all. I don't know. Any other thoughts you might have? Something we missed?
I think we had the big stuff. I mean, I liked the character moments.
Mm-hmm.
Trask's arc, the mutant hysteria, anti-mutant hysteria, lots of action. Lots of action. Some flashbacks to Beast Origins. Yeah, man, I think that's all the big stuff.
Would you be able to?
You got something?
No, I don't. Would you be able to pick a favorite panel?
That's hard because there's so many. It's just 3 issues. So
yeah,
I don't know. Also, it's not Kirby anymore, so it's less like it.
Well, I think that actually is a thing. Like, it's not Kirby, and I have noticed that some of the individual panels don't jump out to me the way they do in the Kirby issues. And I think that is.
They don't feel as posterized or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. They don't feel like I thought Kirby was just the master. Like, you could just cut out panels and it would just be this beautiful, like, singular thing. Mm-hmm. And they don't have that feeling. Mm-hmm. And we are getting into that era where it's all the Marvel books are starting to. This is where they develop that house style where they're all basically just drawing off of Kirby.
Okay.
And I think it just feels like watered down Kirby. And this is what happens after Kirby leaves Marvel, and like there's a lot of, it's not bad art, but it's just, it's not Kirby, but it's still trying to do it. And I think we kind of start to see that here.
Yeah, it's perfectly serviceable art, but it doesn't differentiate itself in any way that is particularly memorable.
Well, and the irony, of course, is that it truly is serviceable. It's not even. I don't think there's even nearly as many like wonky or goofy looking panels that Kirby would draw. That's the weird thing about Kirby. He would draw these knockout panels, but then he would also have these really weird ones where everything's kind of off, and you would get both in the same issue sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I guess.
I think the art's good. It's just not. It doesn't really stand out to me.
I agree. It doesn't. So I don't think I have much to say about picking a favorite. So
right.
I guess it comes down to it. These 3 issues. How many Sentinels?
How many Sentinels?
Out of 5.
I think I'm going to tie it with the Juggernaut.
I was going to say that too. I'm actually really comfortable saying a 4. Like, even though, like we talked about, it's pretty overwritten, and some of the when you get into the nitty gritty of the plot, it doesn't, it's loose, like you said. But I mean, it also deals with actual, real, important themes and things that are unique to the X-Men, and that just makes it so much better than a lot of the previous issues, which was just sort of introduce a character and they fight and that's it. This is kind of heavy, especially for the comics of the time.
It feels like a serious X-Men story, and which we have not had so many issues that have done that.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Like, yeah, I agree. Is it unsettling to you, or maybe ironic that, like, the the three, I won't necessarily say issues, but the three stories so far that we've had that broke the four. Like we gave issue 1 a 4.5, and then the previous the Juggernaut issues a 4, and these issues a 4. Is it unsettling to you that like 5 of the issues that we're saying are the best so far are not actually drawn by Kirby? I mean,
I guess it just kind of bumped me out.
It bums me out a little bit that they're not full Kirby art, because I do think they would be better. But I think this goes back to it's probably because Kirby has more time to devote to the writing.
Okay.
But that's a complete unfounded guess. I actually don't know if that's true. Because I know he was drawing a lot when they started the X-Men, because these stories are happening at the time when Marvel is getting really successful, so Stan can afford to hire other freelance artists. And so what happens is he starts, like, the setup was you launch a title with Kirby, you have him draw a few issues, and then you bring in another artist to take over, somebody who will probably work for cheaper, and you sort of train them in the Marvel style after Kirby establishes the title. Not unlike the way comics have operated pretty much forever, even to the present day. You launch a title with a big name artist, and then after a while they drop off because they can't keep up the schedule. In Kirby's case, though, Stan was specifically moving him around to do a lot of stuff, and the reason I maintain that the reason Stan kept him on as the layout artist was so that not just to sort of train the new artists in the Marvel style, but also to keep writing them. To sort of impress on the artists, like, you need to write it like this, and it was sort of a nice, like, a little buffer before somebody else took over completely with the writing. Because I mean, we can talk about it more later, but I will note with the X-Men, by the time Jack Kirby is completely gone, which is only in a couple more issues, Stan only lasts for a couple more issues himself before he actually steps off of official scripting duties and Roy Thomas comes in.
Okay, gotcha.
So,
gotcha.
And I imagine Roy Thomas is probably doing he probably has a little bit heavier hand in the writing than Stan was, because Roy was brought in as the writer. Stan is still editing the books, but I don't know. We don't have to get, like, too deep into history talk, because there's probably I'm not super, like, I'm not a historian. I'm not the most knowledgeable person on it. This is just I'm kind of.
Well, I got nothing to contribute, so I'm taking your word for it.
Well, that's fine. You and everybody else should take my word for it. But
okay.
But no, I guess yeah. It is almost a little disappointing that, like, the Juggernaut issue and the Sentinels issues, they're really good, and as we've talked about, they're long lasting. They've had a long lasting impact. I mean, this Sentinel story has basically been adapted multiple times. Like, we saw it in the cartoon, the 90s cartoon, all the Master Mold stuff, Trask, was the main plot stuff. And even in the movies, they did it in the Days of Future Past movie.
Yeah, right. With Peter Dinklage as Trask, right?
Which I actually thought was a bold choice, Peter Dinklage as Trask. I liked it.
Yeah.
But, anyway... Yeah, I guess there's almost just a little bit of I don't know, this feeling that I have, not disappointment, but just sort of, the French probably have a word for it.
Or the Germans.
No, the French are probably a little more poetic about it. This malaise that I have, that some of the best issues aren't full Kirby art. I just think of maybe they would be better if it was full Kirby art. But I don't want to sound too down on it, because I think it's still really strong, and Kirby obviously still had a heavy hand in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that might be all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I got a word for you.
Oh, okay.
I believe it's pronounced Weltschmerz. It is the mental depression or apathy caused by comparison of the actual state of the world with an ideal state.
Is that
kind of what you're going for?
That is literally exactly the word. Those Germans have a word for everything.
Yeah. Well, here's a fun fact. I had to remember this word, but I originally heard this word in an Ultimate X-Men comic written by Brian K. Vaughan. So there you go.
That's good.
X-Men answering their own questions.
Beautiful. Life can be learned and discerned just by reading X-Men comics.
We hope
it's
so.
a perpetual energy machine.
Out of it.
That's beautiful. Oh, that's great. Those are good issues too. The Brian K. Vaughan Ultimate X-Men
They were.
issues.
Yeah. He did a good job. Good writer.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, so I think that wraps it up for this issue. Yeah, we're giving this one a 4. These 3 issues together, they all get a 4. I think we're gonna do one more episode of this X edition nonsense. We're gonna do the next 2 issues, which are the final issues that Jack Kirby does the layouts on. Mm-hmm. And I think you'll be interested to find out who this shadowy menace cast on the wall is.
Oh, I certainly am.
Uh-huh. So we'll have a lot to talk about there. But until then, my name is Aaron Walther. You can find me on Facebook. I'm on Twitter at AAWalther on Twitter, AAWALTHER on Twitter. And you can find comics that I write. I have 2 web comics going on right now. I have at GoComics.com, you can read American Chop Suey illustrated by the incredible Ed Bickford. And at Tapastic, you can read The Uncontrollable Recklass, illustrated by the incomparable Sarah Rude McCune. Sarah won't listen to this, so I don't have to feel bad. But I'm so disappointed that she recently got married. Last year she got married. And I'm so disappointed that she's got the hyphenated name, only because Rude is such a great name. I mean... But to be fair, I also don't blame her, because there already is a famous comic book artist, Steve Rude, and I think a lot of people just automatically assumed she was related to him, which I was like, hey, you should use that. If you should get work, just start advertising yourself as the illegitimate daughter of Steve Rude. But that probably would backfire in some way. I don't know.
Or start a punk band with the last name Rude.
Yeah, that would be a good one too. Yeah.
Anyway.
But that's neither here nor there. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you all next time. Okay.